Emma had always been a woman of solitude. For as long as she could remember, she had preferred the quiet hum of her own thoughts over the noise of the world around her. She lived a simple life, a life untouched by drama or excitement. But beneath her calm exterior, there was always a feeling of something missing, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't loneliness, but it was something close, a quiet ache she couldn't escape. That all changed the day she walked into the shelter. It had been an impulsive decision, driven by an inner yearning she had never fully understood. She wasn't expecting to find anything, certainly not something that would turn her world upside down. But there he was. A German shepherd with soulful brown eyes and a coat that gleamed like midnight under the harsh fluorescent lights. He was sitting in the farthest corner of his kennel, watching her as if he had been waiting for her. His name was Buddy. At first glance, he seemed just like any other dog. A bit scruffy, a little disheveled, but there was something in the way he looked at her, something that reached deep into her chest and squeezed. It was as though he knew, as though he understood that they were both seeking something, both lost in a world they didn't quite fit into. Emma's heart fluttered. She'd always loved animals, but there was a special kind of magnetism about this dog. His eyes held a depth of understanding that made her feel like she had been seen for the first time in years. Can I take him home?" she asked the shelter worker, her voice shaking slightly. She didn't expect to make a decision like this on a whim, but when she knelt down to meet Buddy's gaze, it felt like the only thing that mattered. The worker smiled gently. "He's been here for a while," she said. "I think he'd love to go home with you." And just like that, Emma's life changed. From the moment they stepped into her small apartment, Buddy was there. He was a giant compared to the tiny space, his large frame taking up more room than she had imagined. But there was something so comforting about him, his presence so solid and unshakable, that she didn't mind. Buddy was no longer just a dog. He was her anchor. At first, it wasn't easy. He had his own fears. Being abandoned had left deep marks on him, just as her past had left deep scars on her. They both had wounds to heal, but they would do it together. Buddy would watch her from the doorway when she cried, his eyes soft and understanding. He never needed words to tell her that he was there, that he was hers. Buddy was always with her, a silent presence that spoke louder than any words could. Every morning, when Emma awoke to the sound of his soft panting at the foot of her bed, it felt like a reminder that she wasn't alone. When the weight of her past became too much to bear, Buddy was there, his gentle paws resting on her lap, his warm body curling up beside her. It was as though he knew the storm inside her heart and was there to help calm it. But Buddy wasn't just a comfort, he was a protector. Whenever Emma ventured outside, Buddy was always at her side. His keen eyes would scan the surroundings, his ears perked for any sign of danger. Emma found herself feeling safer with him than she ever had without him. In the park, when strangers approached, Buddy would stand a little taller, his body tensing just enough for Emma to feel it. He wasn't aggressive, but he had this innate sense of danger that made him the perfect guardian. Emma had never been a fearful person, but there was something reassuring about knowing that Buddy would always be there, watching over her, his loyalty unshakable. They were a team, Emma and Buddy, bound not just by the love they shared, but by the quiet, unspoken understanding that they needed each other. He was her companion, her confidant, and in many ways, her savior. And as much as she had rescued him from a lonely life in the shelter, Buddy had rescued her from herself. Despite everything they had shared, Emma never expected their bond to be tested. She had no idea how deeply Buddy's loyalty would be tested, or how far their connection would take them. But that all changed one night. It started with a knock on the door. At first, Emma had thought it was just a neighbor or a delivery. But when she opened it, the world she had built with Buddy came crashing down. There, standing in the dim hallway, was a man she didn't recognize. A figure from her past, someone she hadn't thought of in years, someone who had left her life in turmoil. "I think we need to talk," he said. Emma's heart raced. She hadn't seen him since that horrible night, the one she had buried in the deepest parts of her mind. And now, here he was, standing in front of her, bringing with him the darkness she had tried to forget. Buddy, sensing her unease, stepped forward, his body stiff and protective. The familiar growl began to rumble deep in his throat. Emma didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Buddy's presence was enough. She didn't know what this man wanted, but she knew, without a doubt, that Buddy would make sure she was safe. The man looked down at the dog and smiled, an empty, hollow smile. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, "but I think you need to know something." Buddy barked sharply, as if he knew the danger long before Emma had even realized it. And as the man spoke, Emma felt that familiar chill crawl up her spine. This wasn't just a coincidence. Buddy wasn't barking at him for no reason. Something was wrong. And Emma realized, as she looked down at Buddy, that their peaceful life was about to be turned upside down. The calm she had come to rely on, the security Buddy had brought her, was about to be shattered. And in that moment, Emma knew, whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Buddy was at her side, just as he had always been, her protector, her hero, the one who would fight beside her no matter the cost. The storm was coming, and Emma and Buddy would face it together. The first time Emma saw Buddy, it felt like destiny. She wasn't looking for him, but somehow, in the midst of the painful chaos that had overtaken her life, she found herself in that shelter, staring at the German shepherd who would become her world. Emma had just gone through a painful divorce. The kind of divorce that drained every ounce of hope from her, leaving her hollowed out, uncertain about the future. She hadn't realized it at the time, but that life-altering change left a gap inside her, an ache that seemed impossible to fill. She couldn't pinpoint what she was looking for when she walked into the shelter that day, but she knew she needed someone, to help fill the silence. The shelter was noisy, filled with the excited barks and whimpers of the other dogs, all desperately trying to capture her attention. But there was one dog that stood apart from the rest. A large, powerful German shepherd with deep brown eyes that seemed to watch her without judgment. He was sitting quietly in his kennel, his posture poised, but his gaze was what drew her in. There was something in those eyes, something she couldn't quite put into words, but it spoke to her. It was as though this dog, this beautiful creature, could see into her soul. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had always loved animals, but this felt different. This wasn't just a dog, this was something more. It was an unspoken connection, one that felt almost like a calling. The shelter worker noticed her lingering by the kennel. "You like him?" she asked with a gentle smile. Emma nodded, her throat tight, her emotions overwhelming her. She could hardly speak. "This is Buddy," the worker continued. "He's been here for a while. Not many people come for him. He's a bit reserved." Emma crouched down, her heart racing. She could hear the uncertainty in the worker's voice, but the truth was, Buddy wasn't reserved, he was just waiting. He was waiting for someone who would understand him, someone who could heal the wounds he carried. Buddy stood, slowly making his way to the front of the kennel. His large frame seemed intimidating at first, but his gentle eyes told a different story. He stood a few feet away from Emma, watching her carefully, his tail giving a tentative wag. He wasn't rushing to her like the other dogs, desperate for attention. He was calm, waiting for her to make the first move. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to do. She had been burned by her past, afraid of trusting again, unsure if she could handle the weight of another connection. But as Buddy continued to look at her, the loneliness she had been carrying began to melt away. She extended a trembling hand through the bars of the kennel, and slowly, Buddy approached. The moment their hands touched, Emma felt it. It wasn't just a friendly nudge from a dog. It was something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster. She could feel the unspoken understanding between them. Both had been through pain, both had been broken, but in that moment, neither of them was alone. Buddy's nose nuzzled into her hand, his breath warm and steady. Emma closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She looked at the worker. "I'll take him," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. The first few weeks after Buddy came home were a struggle for both of them. Emma had never realized how much of her life had been shaped by loneliness until Buddy arrived. She wasn't just dealing with the weight of a failed marriage, she was learning to navigate life alone, without the comfort of companionship. Buddy, too, had his own scars. He wasn't the playful, energetic dog Emma had imagined. Instead, he was reserved, careful, always watching, never letting his guard down completely. He had his own history, one that was marked by neglect, abandonment, and uncertainty. Trust didn't come easily for him, and it was clear that he wasn't sure about Emma at first. Every time she moved quickly or raised her voice, Buddy would flinch, a reminder of the rough past he had endured. Emma was patient with him. She knew what it was like to be afraid, to keep her distance out of fear of getting hurt. And so, they began their journey together, each taking the time to heal. Every day, they would take long walks in the park. The fresh air, the quiet paths, the peace of being together, bit by bit, it became their routine. Sometimes, Buddy would walk ahead, but most of the time, he stuck close to Emma, just a few paces ahead. At first, their walks were filled with silence. Emma didn't know how to speak to him, how to ease the lingering fear in his eyes, and Buddy didn't know how to let her in. But over time, things began to change. He would sit beside her on the couch, resting his head on her lap, letting her stroke his fur. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The bond between them grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. But there were small moments that marked progress. One day, Emma opened the door to the backyard and watched as Buddy trotted outside without hesitation. He didn't look back at her. He didn't need to. He had begun to trust her, to know that she wouldn't leave him, just as she had promised. It was on one of these walks, a few weeks later, that Emma realized how far they had come. It was early morning, and the air was still cool, the streets empty. As they walked along their usual path, Buddy stopped in his tracks, sniffing the air. He raised his head, ears alert. Something was off. Emma stopped too, her heart quickening. She couldn't hear anything, but Buddy's reaction said otherwise. She waited, watching as Buddy's body stiffened, his eyes scanning the surroundings. For a moment, Emma felt that familiar sense of unease, like something was watching them. But she looked at Buddy, his body language unmistakable, and realized that he wasn't just walking beside her anymore. He was protecting her. That was the moment she knew. Buddy was more than just a dog. He was her protector, her partner. He had his own struggles, his own demons, but together, they were healing. Slowly, surely, they were learning to trust one another, to be there for each other in ways that went beyond words. Emma wasn't just giving Buddy a home. Buddy was giving her something she hadn't realized she was missing: peace, stability, and the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. They were two broken souls, learning to find strength in each other. The evening had started like any other. Emma sat on the couch in the living room, a soft lamp casting a warm glow across the room. Buddy lay peacefully at her feet, his body relaxed as he dozed off, his breathing deep and steady. The house was quiet, too quiet perhaps, but Emma liked it that way. After everything she'd been through, she craved the silence. It gave her a chance to think, to process the emotions that had built up over the years. It had been a few months since she and Buddy had started their life together. Things had settled into a comfortable routine. She had begun to feel a sense of normalcy again, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Buddy was there every step of the way, offering her a sense of peace and stability she hadn't known she needed. Together, they had become a family of two, a quiet, unassuming duo with a bond that was deeper than anything she had ever experienced. But all that peace was about to be shattered. The first sign of something wrong came when Emma heard the soft rattle of the door. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but as it persisted, she stood up, her heart racing. She moved cautiously toward the door, instinctively reaching for Buddy, who had already shifted from his resting position. His ears were perked up, his body tense. He let out a low growl, a sound so quiet yet so full of warning. "Buddy," she whispered, placing a hand gently on his back, trying to calm him, but he was already alert, his eyes locked on the door. It was unusual for him to act like this, especially when there was no obvious threat. Emma paused. Something felt off. She approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The quiet was suffocating now, making the air feel thick with tension. When she opened the door, there was nothing. Just the wind, blowing leaves along the porch and the empty street in front of her. But then she noticed it, a small envelope lying on the ground, placed neatly at the edge of the threshold. No return address, no name, just a plain white envelope. A chill ran down Emma's spine as she bent down to pick it up, Buddy's low growl growing louder behind her. The letter felt heavy in her hands, almost too heavy for something so simple. She opened it slowly, as though she could already feel the weight of the words inside. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper with handwriting she didn't recognize. The words were jagged, written hastily, but they sent an unmistakable chill down her spine. "We know where you are. We know who you are. It won't be long before we finish what we started." Her breath caught in her throat, her hands shaking as she reread the words. The letter was unsettling, cryptic, threatening, and entirely out of place in her quiet life. Emma's mind raced. Who would send something like this? And most importantly, what did it mean? She stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of it, but her thoughts were interrupted by Buddy's sudden movement. He was pacing around the living room now, his body stiff with tension. His tail was no longer wagging, and his eyes were wide, scanning every corner of the house. He was agitated, restless, like something had set him on edge. Buddy's growl grew louder, more insistent, as he walked toward the front door, stopping just in front of it. His eyes were fixed on the wood, his body trembling with an unease Emma had never seen in him before. "Buddy?" Emma asked, her voice shaking with unease. "What is it, boy?" Buddy let out a sharp bark, his stance rigid, his ears pinned back as he stared at the door. This wasn't like him. He was always calm, always in control. But now, there was something primal in his behavior, a raw instinct that Emma couldn't ignore. Her breath quickened. Whatever was happening, whatever had caused Buddy's reaction, it wasn't normal. Emma stepped back, still holding the letter in her trembling hands. She glanced around the room, her mind spinning. Her peaceful, quiet life had just been interrupted in the worst way possible, and she didn't know who was behind it or what they wanted, but she knew one thing. The calm she had come to rely on was over. Buddy, now pacing more rapidly, stopped suddenly and let out a loud bark. His voice strong, deep, and full of warning. It was as if he was trying to communicate something, trying to tell her that there was a danger she hadn't yet seen, something lurking in the shadows just beyond the threshold of her front door. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she carefully closed the door, locking it. She didn't know what Buddy had sensed, but she trusted him. He had never steered her wrong. There was something dangerous out there, and she was sure that Buddy could sense it before she could. She had always known that Buddy was more than just a dog. He had this ability to know when something was wrong, a sixth sense that often made her feel safer than she could explain. But now, as she watched him circle the room, growling low, his instincts were on high alert, and she felt the weight of the danger press down on her. Whatever had been written in that letter was real. It was no longer just a haunting possibility, it was happening. She wasn't just being watched, she was being targeted. The sound of Buddy's growls echoed through the house as he moved closer to her, nudging her hand with his nose. Emma reached down and patted his head, her fingers trembling. "We're not alone, are we, Buddy?" she whispered, feeling a lump form in her throat. Buddy's gaze softened as he turned to face her, his eyes still alert but filled with that familiar sense of calm that always followed his protective instincts. He sat beside her, resting his head against her leg, his body tense but willing to protect her no matter what came next. Emma knelt beside him, her hand on his fur. It was in that moment, as she looked into Buddy's unwavering eyes, that she realized something. Her life had just changed. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. She wasn't sure how she would handle it, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone. Not as long as Buddy was by her side. The quiet of the house had disappeared, replaced by the heavy silence of anticipation. The storm had arrived, and Emma had no idea how or when it would hit, but she could feel it in the air. And for the first time in months, she knew her quiet life was over. The real fight was just beginning. As the days passed, the sense of unease that had settled over Emma only deepened. The letter had been the first sign of something wrong, but as the days unfolded, it became clear that this was no random act. Someone, somewhere, was watching her. And Buddy, as always, was the first to sense it. It started small, subtle, the kind of things that could easily be brushed off if you weren't paying attention. The morning after the letter arrived, Emma found her front door slightly ajar, the lock not quite lined up as it should be. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe she'd forgotten to lock it the night before. But then, as she moved through the house, the small details started to pile up. A chair moved slightly in the kitchen. A picture frame tilted just enough to catch her eye. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her stomach tighten. Something was off. Buddy, who had been unusually calm since the letter arrived, began acting differently. He became restless, constantly moving from one part of the house to the next, sniffing at the air as if sensing something Emma couldn't. His growls were low and constant, always directed toward the windows, the doors. It wasn't just his usual protective behavior. There was a frantic edge to it, a sense that something was lurking just beyond their grasp. Then came the phone call. Emma was sitting at her desk, trying to focus on work, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was distorted, as though the caller was hiding their identity, their words clipped and cold. "I know you've seen it. You can't hide anymore," the voice said before hanging up. Emma's pulse spiked. It wasn't a random call. It wasn't just someone trying to intimidate her. This person knew things. They knew about the letter. They knew about her fear. The feeling of being watched intensified after that. She started noticing unfamiliar cars parked outside her house. At first, she thought it was just coincidence. But then the same cars seemed to appear, parked on different streets, always in her line of sight. Someone was following her. They knew where she lived, where she went. Buddy's behavior worsened. He wouldn't leave her side for a moment. Every time they stepped outside, his ears would be up, his tail straight, his eyes scanning the environment as though he could sense danger lurking around every corner. He had always been protective, but this was different. Buddy was alert, his body tight with tension, ready to act at a moment's notice. Emma had learned long ago that she could trust Buddy's instincts, but this constant vigilance was starting to wear on her. She hadn't felt safe in her own home for days now. The silence that used to be her sanctuary now felt suffocating. The walls felt too close, and she found herself double-checking locks, keeping lights on throughout the house even when she was home, anything to make her feel secure again. And then the break-in happened. It was late one evening when Emma returned home from the grocery store, her arms laden with bags. As she approached the front door, she noticed something strange. The door was slightly open, just enough for her to feel a chill run down her spine. She pushed it open cautiously, Buddy by her side, his hackles raised. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Emma stepped in slowly, scanning the room. The silence felt unnatural, thick with the kind of tension that only came with the presence of something, or someone, unwelcome. Buddy growled softly, his body stiff. She set the bags down and moved into the living room, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. That's when she saw it. The vase that had sat on her mantel for years was tipped over, shattered on the floor. The door to the study was wide open, the room dark. Her heart raced. She couldn't explain it, but the unease settled in her chest like a weight. She rushed to the study, her steps quick, her breath shallow. The room was in disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor, and her desk had been rummaged through. Whoever had been here was looking for something. But what? Buddy darted ahead of her, his sharp eyes scanning every corner, his nose twitching. He approached the desk and sniffed the scattered papers, letting out a low growl. Emma stepped closer, crouching down to gather the mess. That's when she noticed it. A single item out of place. Her laptop, which had been on the desk just hours before, was gone. They hadn't just broken in to steal things. They had come for something specific. Emma stood up, the realization hitting her like a brick. Whoever was doing this, whoever was behind the threats, knew her. They knew everything about her past. It wasn't just random. This was personal. The thought sent a shiver through her spine. She had no idea how deep this went, how far the threads of this situation stretched, but she knew one thing: her quiet, peaceful life was gone. As the days went on, the signs of danger became more undeniable. Her phone was hacked. Contacts she hadn't called in years began receiving strange messages, and her emails were tampered with. There were whispers in her inbox, cryptic phrases that made her skin crawl. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting her, they were toying with her. They wanted her to be afraid. Buddy's behavior grew even more intense. He began to react to things Emma couldn't see, barking at empty spaces, growling at shadows that passed by the windows. His instincts were razor sharp, and Emma was starting to wonder if he knew something she didn't. She couldn't keep pretending this was just paranoia. Every instinct in her screamed that she wasn't just dealing with some random, faceless threat. This was something more. This was connected to her past, to things she had long since buried. Someone had found her, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. Emma's heart pounded as she looked at Buddy, who was standing at the door, his body taut and ready for whatever came next. His eyes were full of determination, unwavering loyalty. As much as she wanted to deny it, she knew the truth now: Buddy wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her only chance at survival. She wasn't just facing a threat, she was facing the ghosts of her past. And with Buddy by her side, she would face them head-on. Whatever danger awaited, they would face it together. It was the dead of night when the phone rang. The sound sliced through the quiet, sending a jolt of panic straight to Emma's heart. She reached for the phone, her fingers trembling as she answered, her voice thick with uncertainty. "Hello." The voice on the other end was distorted, masked in a way that made it impossible to recognize. It was low, guttural, almost mechanical. "I'm watching you, Emma," the voice hissed. "You're not safe. It's not over. We'll finish what we started." Emma's pulse raced. The words felt like a physical blow, each syllable sinking into her chest like a heavy weight. Before she could say another word, the line went dead. The phone went silent in her hand, but the tension in the air was deafening. Her mind spun, trying to make sense of the call, trying to understand what was happening. Who was this? What did they mean? And why now? The fear that had been gnawing at her insides for days intensified, the edges of her reality fraying. She needed to call the police, to get help, but her hands were shaking so violently that it took several attempts before she could dial the number. Just as she pressed the button to connect the call, the phone rang again. It wasn't the police, it was the same anonymous number. This time, Emma didn't even answer. She dropped the phone, her chest tightening, and her mind flooded with all the worst-case scenarios. And then, as if the universe was conspiring to bring her to her breaking point, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. Heavy, purposeful, too loud to be just the wind. Her heart stopped. Buddy, who had been lying quietly beside her, immediately sprang to his feet. His posture was rigid, his ears erect, his eyes fixed on the door. Emma didn't need to see his expression to know what he was feeling. The protective instincts he had always shown were now at full force. The low growl that rumbled from deep within his chest sent a chill down her spine. He sensed danger before she even had a chance to fully process it. "Buddy," she whispered, reaching down to stroke his fur, but he pulled away. His growl grew louder, his body taut with tension. There was no mistake now. Someone was outside. Emma moved toward the door, her every sense on high alert. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, but before she could even reach for it, The door was slammed open with a force that shook the entire house. The impact was so violent that the wood splintered as it flew off its hinges, the door crashing against the wall. A man stormed into the room, his face hidden behind a mask. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weapon in hand, a gun, pointed directly at Emma. She froze, her blood running cold. "Get down," the man barked, his voice gruff. "Now." But Emma didn't move. Fear paralyzed her for a split second, the cold steel of the gun in front of her making everything feel unreal. She wasn't sure if she was still dreaming or if this was really happening. She opened her mouth to scream, to shout for help, but the words caught in her throat. Buddy didn't hesitate for a second. With a ferocity Emma had never seen before, Buddy lunged. The German Shepherd's powerful body collided with the intruder's legs, knocking him off balance. The man stumbled back, his grip faltering on the gun as Buddy's teeth sank into his arm, pulling him to the ground with a growl of determination. The intruder struggled, trying to pry Buddy off, but the dog was relentless. His teeth flashed in the dim light, his muscles taut with every movement as he held the man down. Buddy's barks were sharp, cutting through the air, each one more forceful than the last, each one reminding the intruder that there was no escape. Buddy wasn't just a dog, he was Emma's protector, and nothing was going to hurt her while he was alive. Emma stood frozen in place, unable to take her eyes off the scene before her. She watched in awe as Buddy fought with everything he had, his body moving with a speed and strength that was almost unnatural. The gun clattered to the floor, forgotten as the man writhed beneath Buddy's grip. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped, the only sound in the room the frantic struggle of the intruder and the sharp, protective growls of Buddy. "Buddy, no!" Emma screamed, finally breaking from her trance. She rushed forward, her hands trembling as she grabbed the leash, trying to pull Buddy back, but he wouldn't let go. His loyalty to her was unmatched. He was protecting her, his instincts kicking in to defend her at all costs. The intruder, realizing he was losing the fight, attempted to reach for the gun again. But before he could, Buddy delivered a final, decisive blow, knocking the weapon out of reach. The intruder was pinned beneath Buddy, his face contorted in pain and panic. Emma rushed to the phone, calling 911 with shaking hands. "Help, please. There's been a break-in. He's here. He's armed. Please hurry." But even as she spoke, her mind was racing, her heart still pounding from the chaos unfolding before her. She had seen the depth of Buddy's loyalty, and in that moment, she realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Buddy wasn't just her companion. He wasn't just the dog who had sat by her side through difficult nights. He was more than that. He was her hero. As the sound of sirens approached in the distance, Emma collapsed onto the floor beside Buddy, who was still keeping the intruder pinned to the ground. Her heart ached as she stroked his fur, her voice breaking as she whispered, "You saved me, Buddy. You saved my life." The German Shepherd, breathing heavily but unwavering, let out a low growl, his gaze never leaving the intruder. He was standing guard, making sure no one would ever hurt her again. Emma realized, as she sat beside him, that their bond was deeper than just companionship. It was unspoken, raw, and bound by something much greater than either of them. Buddy had not just defended her life, he had defended her spirit. He had shown her that true loyalty was about more than just being there. It was about giving everything, no matter the cost, to protect the one you loved. In the midst of the chaos, in the heart of the crisis, Emma finally understood the true depth of her connection with Buddy. He wasn't just a dog. He was family. And no matter what came next, they would face it together, unbreakable, unstoppable, and forever united. The sirens of the approaching police cars filled the air, but for Emma, they felt distant, almost irrelevant, as her world shrank down to a single moment, the one where Buddy, the dog who had given her everything, lay at her feet, breathing heavily, his body trembling with pain. The intruder had been no match for Buddy's fierce loyalty, but even heroes could be wounded. Emma's heart ached as she looked at Buddy, his blood staining the carpet beneath him. The attack had left him battered, his fur matted with the evidence of the struggle. One of the man's strikes had landed deep in Buddy's side, and although he had fought valiantly, the toll was too much for his body to bear. "Buddy, please," Emma whispered, kneeling beside him, her hands trembling as she stroked his head. She could feel the warmth of his body against her, the slight rise and fall of his chest with each breath, but it was shallow. It was strained. Buddy's eyes flickered open for a moment, his gaze locking onto hers. Even in his pain, there was that same unwavering trust, that same loyalty. It made Emma's heart break even more. She wasn't ready to lose him. Not like this. She had no time to waste. Emma scrambled for the phone, calling the vet with a shaking voice. "Please. Buddy's been hurt. He's bleeding. Please, you have to help him." The vet's voice was calm but firm, instructing Emma to bring Buddy in immediately. She didn't hesitate for a second. Grabbing Buddy's leash and wrapping it gently around his neck, she lifted him carefully, her heart pounding as she tried not to make his injuries worse. She could feel the weight of his body as she rushed to the car, her eyes darting between him and the road ahead, her mind numb with fear. When she finally arrived at the vet's office, the staff rushed out to meet her. They helped carry Buddy into the back, and Emma was left alone in the sterile, quiet waiting room. She sat there, staring at the door, her body trembling. How could this happen? How could the dog she had come to rely on, the one who had saved her life, now be the one in need of saving? Minutes turned to hours. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Emma waited, the silence broken only by the faint sound of Buddy's whimpers from the back room. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and each minute without news made the fear inside her grow exponentially. What if he didn't make it? What if the person who had hurt him was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another chance to strike? Finally, the vet emerged from the back, his expression serious but not grim. "He's going to be okay," the vet said, and Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. But the vet's next words hit her hard. "He's been through a lot," the vet continued, gently sitting down across from Emma. "We've patched him up for now, but there will be a long road to recovery. He's strong, but you'll need to be prepared. It's going to take time." Emma's throat tightened. How long would it take for Buddy to heal from this? How long would it take for Emma to heal from the fear she had felt when she thought she might lose him? "Can I stay with him?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Of course," the vet replied, nodding. "We'll keep him here overnight, but you can visit any time. He'll need you now more than ever." The night dragged on. Emma refused to leave Buddy's side, sitting by his bed in the dimly lit room, her hand resting gently on his. She could hear the soft beeping of the machines, the occasional shuffle of feet from the staff, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was that Buddy was alive. He was still here with her. But the weight of the night, the fear, the terror, the near loss, hung heavily over her like a dark cloud. She kept her hand on Buddy's side, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. His body was bruised, battered, but his spirit was still there. "Please, Buddy," she whispered softly, her voice breaking. "You can't leave me. I don't know how to face this world without you. You're the only one who's ever really been here for me. Please don't leave me now." Tears streamed down her face as she gently wiped them away, trying to hold herself together. She had never realized just how much she had come to depend on Buddy. He wasn't just her protector or her companion. He was her lifeline, the one constant in a world that had often felt uncertain and broken. Without him, she didn't know who she would be. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to truly feel the depth of her reliance on him. She hadn't fully understood just how much she had come to lean on Buddy until now, when he was vulnerable and in need of her, just as she had needed him all these months. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had taken his loyalty for granted. She wasn't just afraid of losing him because he was her dog. She was afraid because he was her family. Her heart broke at the thought of never hearing his joyful bark again or feeling his warm body by her side. Please don't leave me, Buddy. I need you, she whispered again, her voice fragile. Through the night, Buddy's breathing remained steady, his eyes occasionally flickering open to meet hers. He seemed to understand, even in his pain, that she was there, that she hadn't given up on him. The hours crept by, and eventually, Emma closed her eyes, her exhaustion overwhelming her. She fell asleep in the chair beside Buddy's bed, her hands still on his fur, the connection between them unbroken, even in the quiet, restless hours of the night. The next morning, Emma awoke to the sound of soft whimpers. She bolted upright, panic seizing her chest, but when she looked down at Buddy, she saw that he was still there, alive. His eyes met hers, tired but alert, as if to say, "I'm still here." The vet entered shortly after, his expression calm but reassuring. "He's doing better than we expected," the vet said, nodding toward Buddy. "He's still in pain, but he's a fighter. He'll pull through." Emma exhaled slowly, her breath shaky with relief. She had feared the worst, but now she knew Buddy was going to make it. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but Buddy was strong. He would heal. And so would she. As the vet adjusted Buddy's fore and checked his vitals, Emma stood by his side, gently scratching behind his ears. He nudged her hand with his nose, a small but unmistakable sign of affection. "I'm so sorry, Buddy," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "I never meant for you to get hurt. I never wanted this for you." Buddy's eyes softened as he looked up at her, his tail wagging weakly. Even in his pain, he forgave her. He knew, as she did, that their bond was unbreakable. That this moment, this pain, would pass, and they would face whatever came next together. And as Emma stood there, watching Buddy rest, she realized that their bond wasn't just one of protection. It wasn't just loyalty, it was love, pure and simple. In this moment, more than ever, Emma knew that Buddy was more than a pet. He was her family, and she would fight for him just as fiercely as he had fought for her. The days following Buddy's injury were a blur of uncertainty and small victories. Emma had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to navigate life on her own terms. But now, as she sat by Buddy's side each night, watching over him as he recovered, she began to realize just how much she had come to depend on him. How much she had taken his loyalty and companionship for granted, without fully understanding what it meant to have him by her side. Buddy's recovery was slow, but every day there was progress. The first few days had been the hardest. His body was bruised, his muscles stiff, but his spirit was unbroken. Emma stayed close, never leaving him alone for long. She was there when the vet came to check on him, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the doctor carefully examine his wounds. There was a long road ahead, but Buddy was a fighter, and with each passing day, he showed Emma just how strong he was. They started with short walks. Emma would open the front door, and Buddy, despite his injuries, would wag his tail weakly, eager to get outside. At first, the walks were brief, just a few minutes around the yard, but as the days went by, Buddy grew stronger. His steps became more steady, his eyes brighter, his posture more confident. And as Buddy recovered, Emma found herself recovering too. She had spent so much time focusing on the dangers and the threats that had been looming over her, but now, in the quiet moments of caring for Buddy, she began to understand how much he had given her, not just in times of crisis, but every single day. His quiet presence, the way he always knew when she needed comfort, the way he had stayed by her side even when his own body was broken, she realized how deeply she had come to depend on him. Buddy had been there for her in ways she had never even fully realized. He had been the one who had given her a sense of safety, of peace, in a world that often felt overwhelming. And now, as she cared for him, she realized how much of her heart she had given to him in return. It wasn't just loyalty between them, it was love. True, unconditional love. As Buddy slowly regained his strength, Emma found herself making changes in her own life. She started to take things one day at a time, focusing on the present instead of the fear that had once consumed her. With Buddy by her side, she felt more grounded, more confident. She no longer felt like she was drifting through life, weighed down by the past. Instead, she was learning to live in the moment, to appreciate the small things, the gentle sound of Buddy's breathing, the way he would nudge her hand when he wanted attention, the soft thud of his paws as he trotted beside her on their walks. Each day brought something new, a reminder that recovery, for both of them, was a journey. There were days when Buddy seemed to move more slowly, when the pain still lingered in his body, but there were also days when he seemed to shine, his energy coming back, his playful spirit returning. Emma would throw a ball for him, and though he still couldn't run as fast as he had before, he would trot after it with the same enthusiasm, his tail wagging as he picked it up with his teeth and brought it back to her. These moments of joy, small as they were, reminded Emma that life was still beautiful, that despite everything they had gone through, there was still so much worth fighting for. Buddy's healing wasn't just physical. It was emotional too. The bond they shared had always been strong, but now it was something deeper. They had both been through so much, and through it all, they had learned that their connection wasn't just about survival. It was about love, trust, and the simple joy of being together. Emma would spend hours sitting with Buddy, brushing his fur, or simply lying beside him, her hand resting on his side. She would talk to him, telling him about her day, sharing her thoughts, her fears, her hopes. And in those quiet moments, Buddy would rest his head on her lap, his eyes closing as if to say, "I'm here. I'll always be here." The days began to feel less heavy. The anxiety that had gripped her for so long started to loosen its hold, and Emma found herself breathing easier. She had never realized just how much of her peace had come from Buddy's presence until she didn't have him for those agonizing days when he had been hurt. But now, with him recovering, with him beside her, she felt stronger. She realized that she had found something in him that she had been searching for her entire life. Not just a companion, but a true partner, someone who understood her in ways no one else could. They were both healing, physically and emotionally. Buddy's body was slowly becoming stronger, and Emma was learning to live in the moment again, to appreciate the quiet beauty of their time together. Their bond had deepened in ways neither of them had ever expected. It was no longer just about Emma caring for Buddy, it was about them growing together, becoming something more than just owner and dog. They were family. Buddy's healing wasn't just about the wound on his side, it was about the space that had opened between them, a space that had once been filled with fear, but now was filled with something else. Something brighter. Something that could only be described as love. Each day, as Buddy took another step toward full recovery, Emma realized how much she had taken for granted in her life. She had spent so many years alone, so many years convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, but now, with Buddy beside her, she understood that she was never meant to be alone. And as she watched Buddy slowly return to his old self, his energy coming back little by little, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude wash over her. She had feared losing him, feared that their bond would be severed by a single moment of violence, but now she saw just how unbreakable it really was. Through the pain, through the healing, through the fear and the uncertainty, they had come out the other side. Together, ChatGPT said. It had been a few months since the night Buddy had saved her life, since the chaos had erupted and Emma had thought she might lose him. They had both come a long way since then. The fear that had once gripped her was slowly fading, replaced by a sense of normalcy that felt both comforting and fragile. Every day, Buddy's strength grew, and with it, so did her own. Their bond was deeper than ever, unspoken yet undeniable. They had faced darkness together, and now, in the light of their recovery, they were stronger for it. But the peace they had worked so hard to build was about to be shattered once more. It came in the form of another letter. Emma had just finished dinner when she noticed it. It was lying on the front doorstep, an envelope that seemed to stare up at her, as though waiting for her to find it. The paper was the same crisp white as before, and once again, there was no return address, just a name written in bold, hurried handwriting that seemed to mock her as she bent down to pick it up. She opened it, her heart already pounding in her chest before she even read the words inside. The letter was short, too short for the level of fear it caused. It's not over. We'll finish what we started. The moment she read it, a cold wave of dread washed over her. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with the weight of the words. Emma's hands shook as she crumpled the paper, her mind racing. This wasn't just a random threat. No, this was personal. Whoever was behind these letters, whoever had caused her so much fear, was still out there. And they weren't done with her. "Buddy," Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she looked down at him. Buddy had been resting by the door, his eyes half closed, his tail lazily swishing across the floor. But the moment she spoke his name, he froze. His ears pricked up, his head lifting as if he too had sensed something was wrong. Buddy was always alert, but this was different. He was no longer the calm, laid-back companion he had been just moments before. His body stiffened as he slowly moved toward the door, his growl a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the room. His eyes locked onto the shadows outside, his body tense, ready for whatever might come. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the reaction of a dog who was instinctively protective. This was something deeper, something Emma had seen before, an unmistakable warning. Buddy wasn't just reacting to a threat. He was sensing something, someone. His instincts had never been wrong before, and now, more than ever, Emma trusted him with her life. She moved slowly toward him, her hand reaching out to stroke his back, but he wasn't having it. Buddy's growl deepened as his eyes stayed fixed on the door, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Emma's pulse quickened. Whoever had been behind the threats before, whoever had tried to tear their lives apart, was still out there, and they hadn't finished their work. "Buddy," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What's going on, boy?" Buddy didn't respond. He was too focused, too aware of something Emma couldn't see. She reached for the door, her breath shallow, her heart thudding in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, for whatever was coming next. But she knew that with Buddy by her side, they would face it together. She slowly opened the door, her mind racing as she stepped into the quiet night. The air was still, too still, as if holding its breath in anticipation. But there was no one there, just the usual sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of traffic, the rustling of leaves in the trees. Buddy didn't move. He stood rigid at the doorway, his body tense, his eyes scanning the surroundings as though he were waiting for something, or someone, to appear. Emma stepped outside, her eyes darting back and forth, scanning every corner of her yard, the street, the shadows between the houses. Nothing. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, but still, no one came. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. But even as she looked around, she could feel the weight of the letter in her hand, could hear the echo of the words in her mind, "We'll finish what we started." She didn't understand it. She didn't know why she was being targeted or who was behind it, but she could feel it deep in her bones that this wasn't over. They weren't done with her yet. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow. A figure moving quickly between the houses at the end of her street. Buddy's growl turned into a sharp bark. He immediately darted forward, moving faster than Emma had ever seen him move. She barely had time to react before he was already at the edge of the yard, his body low to the ground, his teeth bared. He was ready to protect her. Whatever was out there, whatever had sent that letter, Buddy was ready to fight. Emma's heart raced as she followed Buddy, but she stopped at the edge of the yard, her eyes wide in disbelief. The figure in the distance was gone. Just like that, vanished. But Emma could feel it, the tension in the air, the unease settling deep in her chest. They were out there, and they were coming for her. Buddy continued to pace, his growls constant, never ceasing. Emma stood still, her hand gripping the fence as she looked down at him. He was on edge, his eyes darting in every direction, his instincts on high alert. This wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone was hunting her, someone who had the patience to wait for the right moment. Emma didn't know who they were or why they had chosen her, but the letter and the shadowy figure had made it clear this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emma's mind raced with possibilities, with thoughts of who might be behind this. But one thing was certain, she couldn't face this alone. Not anymore. "Buddy," she whispered, kneeling down beside him. "We'll face this together, okay?" Buddy's eyes met hers, his gaze steady and unwavering. He didn't need words. His loyalty, his courage, everything she had come to rely on, was there, in the way he stood beside her, ready for whatever was to come. Together, they would face this new challenge, whatever it was. They had been through the worst before, and now, they would face the unknown, side by side. No matter who was out there, no matter what they were up against, Emma knew she wasn't alone. Not as long as Buddy was by her side. The night was still, but Emma felt a shift in the air. Something was coming, and she was ready to face it. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape as Emma and Buddy drove toward the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The old building loomed in the distance, its silhouette a stark contrast against the night sky. Emma's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. She had never imagined her life would come to this. A final showdown with the person who had been stalking her, tormenting her, dragging her into a nightmare that seemed endless. But now, there was no turning back. Buddy, as always, was by her side. His presence was a comfort, but even he couldn't mask the anxiety that seemed to fill the car. He was alert, his ears up and his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement outside the window. He had been her protector through it all, and now, in the final moments of this ordeal, he was ready to fight once again. Emma didn't know who was behind the threats, but she had learned enough to know that this person had been watching her from the shadows, manipulating everything in her life, using her fear as a weapon. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everything she had been through, everything she had survived. And now, she was standing at the edge of her own redemption. As they pulled up to the warehouse, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The building stood silent, its dark windows reflecting the cold light of the moon. There was no sound, no movement. The air felt thick, suffocating, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Emma could feel her heart beating in her ears, the quiet pulse of fear reverberating through her chest. She knew this was it, the moment she had been dreading and waiting for. The end of the line. She turned to Buddy. His eyes met hers, steady and calm, as if telling her he was ready. As if telling her he would never leave her, no matter what happened. It was in those eyes that Emma found the courage to step out of the car, to walk into the unknown with her protector by her side. They approached the door of the warehouse, Buddy walking ahead, his body poised and ready, his sharp senses on full alert. Emma followed close behind, her hand tight on the leash, her mind swirling with every possible outcome. She wasn't sure what she would find inside, but she knew one thing for certain: she would not face it alone. As they entered the warehouse, the darkness seemed to swallow them whole. The air was stale, thick with dust, and every step they took echoed through the empty space, amplifying the silence that surrounded them. The warehouse was vast, the shadows stretching out before them like an endless maze. The only light came from the faint glow of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Buddy was tense beside her, his growls low, his nose twitching as he took in every scent, every detail of the space. He was leading the way, sniffing the air, his eyes darting between the shadows. Emma could feel his unease, but she didn't let it stop her. She had come too far to turn back now. "Show yourself," Emma called out, her voice steady, despite the fear that threatened to overtake her. "I know you're here. I'm not afraid of you anymore." A cold, mocking laugh echoed from the darkness ahead. Emma froze, her heart skipping a beat as a figure emerged from the shadows. The man she had feared, the mastermind behind the threats, stepped forward, his face hidden behind a mask of shadows. "I see you've finally decided to face the truth," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "It's almost too late for you, Emma. You shouldn't have come." Emma's breath quickened, her pulse pounding as the figure stepped closer, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. But she wasn't backing down. She had faced enough fear. She had faced enough darkness. "This ends tonight," Emma declared, her voice stronger now, fueled by the strength that had carried her through this whole ordeal. "You've been watching me, manipulating me, but not anymore. I'm not afraid of you." The man chuckled again, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You should be. You're just one more pawn in a game much bigger than you can comprehend." Buddy's low growl cut through the tension in the air, his body stiff as he stood between Emma and the intruder. His instincts were sharp, his senses on overdrive, and he knew that the threat before them was no longer just a shadow. It was real. The man was dangerous, and Buddy was ready to protect Emma at all costs. "You don't scare me," Emma said, her hand tightening around the leash, her eyes never leaving the figure in front of her. "You've made a mistake if you think you can break me. I have Buddy, and he's not going anywhere." The figure's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a smile. "You think a dog can protect you? It's laughable." But before he could take another step forward, Buddy lunged. With a force that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, Buddy rushed toward the man, his teeth bared and his growl full of ferocity. The man stumbled back in shock, trying to grab at his weapon, but Buddy was too quick, too powerful. In one swift movement, Buddy knocked the man to the ground, pinning him with his weight, his jaws snapping just inches from the intruder's face. "Buddy!" Emma shouted, rushing forward, her heart racing. "Stay with him." The man struggled beneath Buddy, but Buddy held him fast, his grip unyielding. Emma moved quickly, keeping her eyes on the man as she grabbed her phone from her pocket, dialing 911. She didn't need to say anything. She just held the phone out, the sounds of the struggle echoing through the warehouse. Help was on the way. The man's breath came in quick, panicked bursts as he tried to push Buddy off, but the dog's loyalty and strength were unmatched. He wasn't going to let this man harm Emma, not now, not ever. "You're done," Emma said coldly, stepping forward. "This ends now. You'll never hurt anyone again." The man's face twisted in rage. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. You think this is over? You think I'm the only one? There's much more to this than you realize." But before he could say another word, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. The police had arrived. In that moment, as the man was arrested and taken into custody, Emma realized that the danger was finally over. The truth about why she had been targeted, the mastermind behind the threats, was now exposed. The person who had tormented her and tried to tear apart her life had been defeated. And standing beside her, as always, was Buddy, the dog who had saved her life, the dog who had shown her what true loyalty and bravery looked like. They had faced this moment together as a team, and they had emerged victorious. As Emma and Buddy left the warehouse, the weight of the past few months began to lift from her shoulders. The danger was over. The fear that had once haunted her was gone, replaced with a quiet sense of peace. She could breathe again. But even as she walked away from the scene, with Buddy by her side, she knew that they would never be the same. They had been through too much, faced too many trials, to return to the way things were before. And yet, as they walked into the quiet night, Emma realized that they had both found something they hadn't even known they were searching for. A bond that was unbreakable, a love that would withstand any challenge. Together, they were unstoppable. A year had passed since that terrifying night in the warehouse, and as Emma sat in the park, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, she couldn't help but reflect on how much her life had changed. The seasons had shifted, time had moved forward, but for Emma, it felt like nothing had been the same since Buddy had entered her life. The dog who had once been a quiet companion, a dog she thought might simply bring comfort after a painful chapter in her life, had turned out to be the anchor she never knew she needed. Buddy sat beside her now, his body resting comfortably on the grass, his brown eyes soft and watchful. The once urgent energy he'd had after his recovery had mellowed into something more peaceful, more grounded. His coat had started to gray around the muzzle, his movements slower, but there was still the same quiet strength in his gaze, the same unwavering loyalty. Emma ran her fingers gently through his fur, just as she had done so many times before. His body had healed from the injury he'd suffered in the fight with the intruder, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. They were the marks of survival, of courage, of a bond that had been forged through struggle and sacrifice. She thought back to the days of fear, of uncertainty, the nights spent wondering if she would ever feel safe again, if the nightmare would ever end. She thought of the letters, the intruder, the constant anxiety. But what Emma had learned through all of it, through every challenge, was that Buddy was her constant, her protector, her confidant, and her greatest source of strength. No matter the circumstances, no matter the danger, Buddy was there, never wavering. And now, sitting in the park, it was clear to Emma that their bond had only grown stronger. They had both been tested in ways she hadn't thought possible. But through it all, they had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger on the other side. "Remember this place?" Emma asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was setting. "The park where we first came when I brought you home? It feels like a lifetime ago." Buddy raised his head, his eyes meeting hers. There was a soft understanding in his gaze, as though he remembered, as though he knew that their lives had changed in this very spot, that it was here where the first steps of their journey had begun, one filled with uncertainty, but also one filled with hope. Emma sighed deeply, her chest tight with emotion. There were still times when the fear would creep in, the memories of the threats, the terror of that night when Buddy had been injured. But now, they didn't define her anymore. She had let go of the weight they carried. They had both healed. She thought about the year that had passed, the challenges, the fear, the danger, but she also thought about the love that had flourished between them, the quiet moments of companionship, the walks in the park, the shared glances, the unspoken understanding that only they could truly know. What had started as a desperate attempt to fill the emptiness inside her had blossomed into something far greater, a bond that couldn't be broken, no matter what the world threw at them. The fear and danger had become part of their past, but they no longer held the same power over her. She had learned to live in the present, to savor the peace they had fought so hard to find. And now, with Buddy beside her, she felt more at peace than she ever had before. "We made it, Buddy," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her hand resting on his head as he leaned into her touch. His fur was soft under her fingers, the rhythm of his breathing calm and steady. Buddy's eyes closed for a moment, and Emma could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her hand. He was here. He had made it. He had fought for her, sacrificed for her, and in return, she had done the same for him. They had both given their all, and now they could simply be. In this quiet moment, in the peace they had found together, Emma realized that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. They had already overcome so much. As she looked down at him, her heart swelled with gratitude. Buddy had saved her in ways she could never fully express. He had protected her body, her mind, and her heart. He had been there when she was at her weakest, giving her strength when she thought she had none left. And now, as she sat beside him in this moment of quiet calm, she knew that she would always owe him everything. "I'm so grateful for you," she whispered, her voice soft, her words almost lost in the rustling of the leaves. "You've been my rock, Buddy. I don't know what I would have done without you." Buddy's tail gave a slow, contented wag, his head resting more firmly against her leg. Emma smiled, her heart lifting at the simple gesture. It wasn't much, but to her, it was everything. It was the reminder that no matter how much time passed, no matter how much they both changed, their bond would remain the same, unbreakable, unshakable. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Emma leaned back on the grass, her hands still resting on Buddy's side. He lay beside her, his head on her lap, content, as if he knew that this moment, this peace, was all they needed. They had faced the worst of the world, and now, together, they were stronger for it. The future was still uncertain. Life was always unpredictable, and danger could come at any time. But as Emma looked down at Buddy, she felt ready for whatever came next. As long as they were together, she knew they would be okay. They had survived the storm, and now they were basking in the calm. And no matter what the world threw at them, they would face it side by side.